Welcome to another Divine Quantum podcast. Our mission is to bring insightful conversations that will help you tap into your higher self. I am Yuri, and Chris Habelo, my business partner, is not here today. I'm pretty bummed. She was pretty bummed. She got COVID. And she never got COVID before, but now she got the fevers, the chills, the headaches, and all of that. So she couldn't join us. She was very sad because she was really looking forward to this conversation. I had the honor and amazing chat with this amazing relationship coach. His mission is to help individuals to reach their true potential by understanding the different dynamics of relationships and healing unresolved trauma and childhood wounds. His name is Stefanos Sifandos. And please make sure you subscribe to our channel so you always get the notification when we upload new videos. Thumbs ups on this video to help our algorithm. And if you like this conversation, leave in the comments below the biggest insights that you had from this conversation. Aloha, let's dive in.
It's very good to meet you.
Chris, my business partner, she was supposed to be here, but she got the COVID after all this time. She got it, but yeah, she had fever, and so she couldn't come today. But she's here in spirit. She's bummed that she missed because we're so excited about today's episode.
Yeah, no problem.
And before we start, I would like to give our audience a little bit of more about background of who you are, where you came from, and how did you get to this space of being a relationship coach and doing this amazing work that you're doing?
Yeah. So, for me, I heard Dr. John Demartini once say that our greatest wounds often become our greatest values, or our greatest voids often become our greatest values. Mm. And so for me, I had a very difficult time relating to people growing up. I had a challenging time being seen, feeling safe in the environment that I was in, that I grew up in. Grew up with a lot of violence and volatility. And so it became a very natural progression for me to lean into supporting others on their journey, helping them feel safe, understanding their circumstances, getting to know them, tapping into deeper levels of empathy and compassion. Initially, in the earlier years of my career, in the early years of this service and this practice, I didn't do that very well. It was very challenging. And even now it can still be challenging when I'm not tapped into the wholeness of me, when I'm living from trauma or I'm living from old patterns or reactivity. It's more difficult to access that because I'd often find myself suppressing a lot of anger and a lot of resentment that I had towards my family or towards even parts of myself growing up that I hadn't really worked with. Mm-hmm. And so being compassionate for others and being empathetic for others, it came natural to me, but it took its toll unless I was giving to myself. And so over the years, I've learned to I guess, harmonize that within myself and learn to give as well as, receive in more profound ways.
Thank you for sharing that. I've seen a few of your other podcasts where you share your story, that you had a sex addiction, and that was your turning point where you had this awakening moment. Can you share with us a little bit more about that? Because I feel like a lot of people that I personally know and a lot of our listeners go through the same type of situation, especially women, where I feel like our culture, the man is culturally incentivized to chase after women, and it's just this never-ending trap. So I'd like for you to share a little bit more about that.
If I think of it from this way, mm-hmm. and I reflect back on my relationship to myself, my relationship to sex, my relationship to intimacy, my relationship to my trauma, my relationship to women, my relationship to the feminine, my relationship to men and to the masculine as well, because all of it is intertwined, right? That none of that really lives in isolation. And so if I look at all of those aspects of my life, including many more as well, my relationship to shame, my relationship to my body, all of those areas felt very distorted and very fractured growing up, mm-hmm. even into my early adulthood. And so as a result of feeling fractured and feeling like I was broken and confused, which are not desirable states to be in, I sought to compensate. So how I would compensate, and how many of us do, and what ends up being a compulsion or an addiction, is I compensated through attempting to feel better in my body and in my life. In other words, I needed to put pleasure in my body. I needed to put pleasure into my life experiences. For me, that was food, adrenaline, novelty and variety, whether it was with women, sex, or traveling. And so my come from was to be in constant avoidance of this thing that I was running from, which was the fracture and the confusion I was feeling in all these really, really important areas of my life. And until I dealt with the underlying core trauma and the wounds and the difficulty that forged and formed these patterns growing up, I would just get caught in these cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would need more sex, more food, more adrenaline, more adventure, more of all these things that I was chasing, but that really were empty for me. So again, I want to repeat, this is really important. It wasn't until I really faced and I oriented towards my trauma, towards my pain, and said, okay, I'm here to look at all of this and embrace all of this as it's something that would be good, fun, enjoyable to embrace, or at least desirable. I'm not going to get anywhere. I'm going to keep chasing myself. So I've got to make a change. And that was the change that I really lent into.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I feel like more and more nowadays, men and women as well are awakening to the fact that we have to look to our wounds and we have to look to our traumas to stop the cycle and repeating the things that we have in our lives, right? Do you think it's possible to fix the relationship when there is like that type of like broken of trust involved and things like that? Or how can we fix a relationship?
So firstly, language is really important. And I don't think you're wrong when you say fix, because there is a brokenness to the relationship. As long as we're talking about the relationship as this third entity, this living, breathing organism, and we're not necessarily saying I'm broken, I need to fix me. Mm-hmm. So the relationship is broken, or the relationship is fractured or damaged as a result of continuous actions that have taken place in that relationship and an injection of unconscious habits and patterns that aren't really serving the health or the longevity of the relationship. So to answer your question very directly, it really depends. Mm-hmm. Yes, there can be deep repair that takes place. I don't want to say irrespective of the wounds that are caused. It's more respective of, are both people willing to lean into the relationship and make the changes they both need to make? Are they willing to forgive? And in order to forgive, you need to truly feel. In other words, you need to face the uncomfortable stuff within yourself and within the container of the relationship. Is it salvageable? Is the other person showing genuine signs of wanting to change? And are they showing signs of actual change that is in alignment with what you truly want? Is the relationship really for you? Is this a highlight that has literally highlighted that the relationship isn't for you? So there are many moving parts to give an answer to that. There's no objective cut and dry response that says if this then that. It depends on so many variables, primarily the deeper exploration of self. And so before we can get to a calmer, slower pace of understanding what's happening in the relationship, we have to feel safe enough in our bodies. And that may mean releasing some big trauma and actually grieving what we thought the relationship was and now isn't. And during that period of time, anything can happen where you may realize, let's say you're in that situation, or I'm in that situation, and I grieve and I purposely grieve. I may realize very deep truths about the relationship and about my needs. And I may think and feel that this relationship cannot satisfy that. So it's time for me to leave. It depends on so many factors.
What are the main signs you would say that people could get into the conclusion that that relationship is not for them? Because I know a lot of women get into the confusion, and is this for me? And men keep promising things that they're going to change. I hear a lot of that from a lot of women. What are the main signs?
Is that person willing to change? Well, if they're not willing to change, that's a sign. Are they able to change? Well, if they're not able to change, that's a sign. Are they genuinely remorseful for what they've done? If they're not, that's another sign. Like the signs stack up, right? And so everything I shared a few moments ago, just the opposite of that.
Yeah. And in the beginning of all relationships, it seems to be everything unicorns and rainbows. Is it true that a relationship, you can sustain that, or does relationship involve in different ways? I know every relationship is different, but I feel like a lot of people, they seek that rainbows and unicorns stage and that's why they keep jumping. Am I correct?
I think you're very accurate in that. And if we put some more flavor and color and structure to what you've just shared, is it's known as the honeymoon period or the limerence phase. And so what's happening physiologically and hormonally in our bodies is that we're very much blinded, narrow-sighted. We're polarized in our view of the relationship and of the person. And there are some psychosocial dynamic reasons for that. And there are just physiological reasons for that, purely biological and purely driven by fertilization driven mechanisms, I should say. And so when we look at that and that passes, and so eventually it does pass, it's a little different for everyone. Sometimes it's a few weeks, sometimes a few months, sometimes a few years, but it does pass because it's a phase of relating. It's not a better phase or a worse phase. You touched on something really important, the addiction to the honeymoon period. Some people crave that phase, the unicorns and rainbows and roses, and that's all they want because they just want the goodness. They're not willing, because what happens ultimately from a psychosocial, psycho-emotional, relational perspective, the honeymoon period ends so that both of you can come into togetherness in a more whole way. So more of you becomes revealed, and how you deal with that revealing, if you push it away or if you embrace it and you meet your discomfort in that, and you meet the change that you're going through with greater equity and with greater equanimity, you can outgrow patterns and behaviors that no longer serve you, that are maybe unhealthy. So an example of that could be, let's say the honeymoon period ends and you find that your partner is abrasive and rude to you, or they're impatient. And that reminds you of when, and you're still safe, physically safe in the relationship, of course, because if you're not physically safe in the relationship, you've got to get out. You've got to create space so that you're physically safe. But they're abrasive, that they were never used to be like that when you first met. It was all unicorns and rainbows. And now more of their true self is showing because they're more comfortable. That hormonal flush has dwindled down, and there's more of the person being revealed. And now what's happening is that reminds you of maybe when you were younger and your father was like that, and you didn't have a voice and you didn't have an opportunity to express yourself and speak your truth. So if you just cower and retract and minimize your voice again, all you're doing is reinforcing a pattern that you want to actually break out of. One of many reasons why you've got together is maybe this partner just needs healthy boundaries. Maybe this partner just needs to hear, hey, when you speak like that, it reminds me of. And as a result of that, I feel really, really hurt and scared. And I don't want to be scared, and I want to be able to tell you. And maybe that partner says, I'm so sorry, that's not my intention. My mum used to be like that to me, and I've just been like this all my life. And I've never been accepted for it, but you don't seem to be judging me now. You're just making a request. And that's really beautiful. I'm going to do my best to make changes. Now, that's a best case scenario, what I just gave then. There's usually a lot of back and forth before it even gets to that, if it even gets to that. But I want to say that's very possible, very, very possible. My wife and I do it as an example, right? Like we can sometimes continue to fall down, but we can continue to repair. Mm-hmm. So there's opportunities for our coming together that extends beyond the honeymoon period and the honeymoon phase of relating. That's really healthy for us. But most of us, like you said, in my words, not yours, but they're addicted to the honeymoon phase. And when it gets uncomfortable, they're out. But there's no real rich growth and learning there. And so again, we just got to get really clear on who we are and what we want.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think that can apply as well for dating apps, right? A lot of people, they supposedly they don't ever find the right match, but the root of all that, could that be the addiction to the dating apps? Is that such a thing nowadays?
Very, very good point. Very good point. And is it an addiction to the dating apps, or is it an addiction to the validation, the external validation that's needed?
Mm-hmm. From others.
Yeah, from others. That's right.
So when we are in this first honeymoon stage, how can we spot narcissists? Because a lot of women have been trapped in narcissist relationships and they seem like they're in this cycle. How can they spot that type of man beforehand? Because at first everyone is perfect, they just want to show their best. How can we differentiate?
Yeah, it's often really difficult because it depends on the kind of narcissist, but the narcissist that you're probably referring to, is going to be attracted to highly empathetic people. And unless you've really done a lot of inner work around your self-worth, and that's really the answer, right? Like really doing a lot of deeper inner work around your self-worth, it will be more and more difficult to spot that. But I guess some of the things that you could notice are the excessive behaviors. So is that individual love bombing you? You know what that is? Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they're just showering you with love and it's just so much and it's, oh, I want to marry you and I want to go here with you and I want to do this with you, that could be a red flag. It may not be, but it could be. If you see an oscillation, like a steep spike and a steep change in their behavior, that could be a red flag. If you see them being very self-centered in their speak amidst all their generosity and flamboyancy, that could be a sign as well. If you see them treating strangers in ill ways, that could be a sign. If you see them inconsistent in their behavior with you and how they show up and their messaging to you and their even their tone and their enthusiasm when you're dating, that could be a sign. And more importantly, you'll notice all of these things really quickly or really early on when you've done your inner work and you're no longer trauma bonded, or you no longer require that trauma train to be colliding and clashing with your trauma train. And you'll notice it really quick and you'll set healthy boundaries. And when you set those healthy boundaries, you'll see them go away really quickly.
Thank you. Can you explain for our listeners a little bit more about the trauma bonding and what is it? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll give you a very simple example of trauma bonding. So let's say you have an anxious attachment style and someone has an avoidant attachment style, and those two people come together. And so when there's conflict, the avoidant attachment style is more than likely going to want to get out. They're not going to want to be in the conversation or the communication. They're going to check out. They may even leave the relationship. They may stonewall in the relationship. They'll be emotionally disconnected. They'll disappear for a few days, whereas the anxious attachment style is very needy, needs to know everything, needs to make sure that the problem or the conflict is resolved immediately. And so there's an example of those trauma trains colliding. And the trauma trains are connected. Everyone's trauma train or trauma trains, I just call them that, they're just connected to our childhood experiences. And so what we went through as children shape who we become as adults. And an attachment style is one of those things that's formed fairly early on, but we always have an opportunity, well, not always, but we have an opportunity to create healthy attachment, secure attachment styles growing up, but it requires effort and work. And often in that particular example of those two trauma trains colliding, part of that effort and work is recognizing that, being self-aware of your own trauma or your own attachment style or your own dispositions in life, and being mature enough to say, okay, this isn't a pattern I want to continue because it hurts me and it hurts others. What can I do differently? And then forging agreements around that in the relationship. And so your agreements may look like, hey, I completely understand you have an avoidant attachment style and conflict really bothers you in that way and you want to get out. For me, I need to fix it. I need to make sure that we're resolved really quick. Otherwise I become very anxious. And so where's a place that you can meet in the middle? There's an agreement that, okay, you're going to have some space for 24 hours or 12 hours, but then you promise you're going to come back and we're going to talk about things. So you can call it meeting in the middle. You can call it compromising. You can call it sacrificing. You can call it what you like. Ultimately, there are agreements that you both, in an empowered, mature way, get to make together.
Thank you. And I think that also plays a role on finding balance in a relationship when people have different love languages, right?
Yeah. So with respect to love languages, which is a tool to, I guess it's a tool, it's a practice, it's one of the ways that we relate. And I think Gary Chapman developed the 5 love languages, or was the founder of that system, so to speak. And it's a very simple system and it's great. And when you understand the way you like to be related to, and you understand the way your partner likes to be related to, even if they're different, that's okay. That's not a big issue. However, having agreements, knowing what each other's love languages are, and speaking in those love languages can be very loving and caring for each other.
Thank you. Why do you think the divorce rate is so high and is continuing to increase? And is there a way what are the main keys for a successful marriage in your point of view?
Well, it's a very big question. It's a very loaded question. So keys to a successful relationship or a successful union it really depends on the individuals. And I'm going to come back to agreements again, really being able to speak your truth, be mature enough to express what your needs are, to own your worth, to really have healthy boundaries in the relationship, to ask for what you need, to listen, to really listen to the other person and their needs, to be clear and certain that you want to be in relationship, to be constantly checking in with yourself around the relationship. Is it adding value to your life? Is it adding value to your partner's life? Is it adding value to the lives of those around you? There's some really big questions to ask. Some of the reasons why couples divorce is because people don't communicate. They get caught up in very busy lives. They don't address their trauma, essentially. They're not aware of themselves. They lack self-awareness. They lack the maturity to be in conflict. They don't know how to be in conflict in healthy ways and to repair in healthy ways, and that can be very challenging. And people are unwilling to really do their inner work and do the work on the relationship and the effort that relationships require. And some people are just stuck in survival mode, survival mode around finances or making ends meet, or, supporting children in the relationship. And there's no time. They don't make time for the relationship. And that can be really challenging. And then once that love is lost, it can be regained, but it's just far more difficult for that love to be regained. So there's some of the reasons why, relationships can fail.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Another question that a lot of our followers asked is why is there so much gap in the sex and orgasm between men and women? Normally men wants a lot of quantity and women are oftentimes not vibing with that. How can we deal with that on a relationship?
So two things. Firstly, having agreements. And what I mean by that is getting really clear on what you both want in relationship, whether it's around sexuality and sexual intimacy, or whether it's around something else, right? Such as children, such as who takes care of what around the house, such as where you want to live, traveling, et cetera, right? The other part is really checking in within self and really checking in, where is this coming from? I want sex every day, or I want sex 3 times a week, or I want sex 4 times a month, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But where's it coming from? Is it coming from a healthy place? Is it coming from a conditioned place? Is it coming from an unhealthy place? Is it coming from a compulsion? Being mature enough and open enough to really want to check in with self on where that's coming from is another part of it. And then bringing that to your partnership as well, and really checking in with what your partner's needs are. Something that's really important, and goes back to the question you asked about a successful relationship, is knowing each other's traumas. Do you know your partner's trauma? Are you familiar with their upbringing? Are you familiar with where they came from? Are you familiar with the pain that they endured? Are you familiar with what they're holding onto and harboring now? Are you familiar with how they deal with conflict and pain and fear and difficulty? Are you even familiar with their deepest fears? Really knowing your partner and holding them in deep regard when they're acting in a way or behaving in a way that may be disruptive to the relationship, knowing that it's coming from a wounded or hurt part. It's not to excuse their behavior. It's not for that. But it's to understand and empathize and connect and be deeper compassionate. That's what really it's about.
In the end of the day, everything, the root of it is healing, right? Healing all the traumas, because that's what creates all the imbalances between the feminine and masculine energies. Can you explain to our listeners a little bit of the dynamic of a balanced feminine and masculine in relationships, in healthy relationships?
Yeah. So that's another really loaded question, because it's dependent so much on what people consider to be masculine and feminine within themselves, how connected they are to their own sense of masculinity or femininity. Ultimately, you want to be in complementary polarity with your partner, because when you're in complementary polarity, what's happening is, and it just happens to be that most men are in masculine energetics and most women are in feminine energetics naturally, so to speak. Naturally is an interesting word, but we'll just use that word for today. And not all, but most. And masculine and feminine energetics is not completely or solely exclusively connected to biology only. It plays a role though. Biology definitely plays a role, as does culture, as does values and beliefs, and an array of other things too. But you want opposition, not opposition, but opposite, essentially, complementary opposites, so that you can communicate and relate in a way that feels really empowered and feels really good and feels really natural to the flow of how you want the relationship to be.
Thank you. lately on Instagram, I've been seeing a lot of posts, and people have been sharing that with me as well, about pornography. What are your thoughts about pornography? A lot of people are saying it's bad. Some people are like, oh, it's not a big deal. What are your thoughts about it, and why it's been brought up lately and so much has been talked about?
Yeah. It's not about bad or good. It's again about the come from.
Mm.
What's the come from for utilizing pornography? For the greater part, mainstream pornography is not healthy, and it's not a wise thing to go down the rabbit hole of, because it hijacks our dopamine system, it hijacks our nervous system, it gives us a false sense of what relating and intimacy actually is. There's so many negative side effects of regular or excessive use of pornography, especially if the come from is coming from a compensatory place. In other words, I'm shy to talk to women. I'm shy to speak my truth. I'm shy to be myself. And so I will gain a sense of intimacy through watching pornography because I'm not being judged. Orgasm is easy and quick. I have a plethora of variety that I get to choose from, but you're not really, because you don't necessarily have access to the people that you're looking at. And even if you did, would you really want to? Is there an actual match there, or is it just a physical attraction and that's it? So there's just a lot of downside to it. There's very little upside, and the upside only exists when you're very, very mature and conscious about it. Like very, very mature and conscious about it.
Is there such a rule of what makes a woman attractive? I know everybody has different personalities. They have different, things that they're attracted to, but is there a main formula that, let's say, not formula, but main ingredients that makes a woman attractive?
It's different for everyone.
Mhm.
It is different for everyone because we all have different tastes, and those tastes come from different places within. However, there's no one size fits all. We're very different. However, there are basic biological markers, and even healthy psychological markers that we all look for as people. Like, can a person tap into gratitude? Do they have agency? Do they believe in themselves? Do they carry high levels of self-worth and confidence? Not arrogance, but confidence. When men are looking at women from a biological perspective, again, fertilization-driven sex is one of those drivers alongside bonding behavior that really unconsciously propels us towards people or away from people. So whenever you're having a conversation with anyone, and there's an quote unquote age limit to this, at some level, but probably not, because it's something that's just deep within us. So I'd have to do a little research on that age limit piece. I'm not sure about that, but ultimately, whenever we're communicating with anyone, especially of the opposite sex, unconsciously, the vast majority of the time, maybe not always, but the vast majority of the time, there is this ongoing unconscious assessment: is this person suitable for me? To procreate with, to have children with? Are they a suitable mother? Is he a suitable father? Like, is he a suitable partner? Is she a suitable partner? And both men and women are unconsciously looking for different things in the partner. Like, a woman will look for a man that is confident, that exhibits humor, that is strong, that is, that exercises regularly and is fit and healthy, because that indicates commitment, that indicates dedication, that indicates discipline, that indicates confidence. All great qualities that would be very great for a man or a father to have, right? To look after the family, just as a woman looks after the family in her own way. And so there are things that we look for unconsciously. The conscious part is more what we're conditioned by growing up and what society tells us. And that's a little more subjective, if you like.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. Another question that we had from our followers is that, can infidelity be prevented or no? Yeah.
I mean, anything can be, well, maybe not anything can be prevented, but yes, infidelity can be prevented. Yeah. And again, it depends on the maturity of the individual, depends on the level of honesty, depends on the level of comfort with telling the truth. It depends on how, disconnected they are from their trauma, from their wounds, from their patterns. Infidelity, for the most part, is really an escape. It's a means to avoid. Sometimes it's to hurt other people on purpose because we've been hurt, so we want to hurt them because we know that's going to hurt them, so we'll do that thing that hurts them. Sure, but most of the time, people, all needs are not being met. right? Like needs are not being met, but even that's an escape because you're not addressing the needs that aren't being met. And even you may say, well, I'm telling them that they don't give me enough intimacy, or I want this and I want that. But then instead of ending the relationship or going deeper into the relationship, you cheat. I mean, that can be avoided. Like there's ways to, of course it can be avoided. It's just a matter of, is the person ready to really look at their stuff and look at what they need to do in the relationship and who they need to be in order to avoid dishonest behavior.
But just to make it clear, the avoidance doesn't come from the partner that got cheated on, right? That person, there is nothing that she or he could possibly do to avoid that, because the person that's cheating is cheating because of a reason within himself or herself. Is that correct?
Both.
Both. It could be both.
So right now, are you sitting on a chair?
Yes.
Okay. If you weren't sitting on the chair, would you be sitting on a chair? No, you wouldn't be. Right. So you have a relationship with a chair.
Yes.
In a partnership, there's a relationship in that partnership. Now, if I cheat in a relationship, which I've done unfortunately many times in my life, that's on me. That action's on me. I did that. I'm responsible for that action.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say the dynamic hasn't contributed to that action. I'm 100% responsible for my action.
Mm-hmm.
Even if my partner yelled at me, even if she hit me, even if she cheated on me, that doesn't excuse my behavior. It doesn't give me a reason to go cheat or do something that's dishonest in the relationship that breaks an agreement. However, when we're ever in relationship with something, by default, that thing is contributing to the reality that we're living in. So it's hard for people to get their heads around this, because some people may say, what are you saying, Steph? Are you saying that it's his fault that she cheated, or it's her fault that he cheated because she's just being herself? Or no, it's not her. It's not about fault. We've got to get away from fault. If we want healing and we want to go deeper into feeling and reconciliation, we've got to move away from fault, and we have to take personal responsibility. That's part of that agency piece, right? But we can't blame, we can't shame. That's not going to help. But the answer to your question, again, for me, from my perspective, it's both and.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree with that. And that's what we just said, that not having a blame on someone and taking 100% responsibility is the number one way how we can heal and not project or blame on others, because then we're just living on victim. And one more question that a lot of our followers asked is, sex on the first night, okay, casual sex, is that okay or is not okay? Is that like, are you leaking your energy through that? What are your thoughts on that?
It really depends. It really depends on what your come from is. It really depends on your values. It depends on the agreements that you have with yourself and your relationship to sex and sexuality and to having sex on the first night. And it depends on where you are in your path and your history and what you've come to. And it's not wrong to have sex on the first night. It's not right to have sex on the first night. It depends on so much on the individual. And for me to give a definitive answer, which I very much can, I'd need definitive circumstances. I would want to know. So if, for example, you and I are speaking and you were asking me that for yourself, I would ask you a bunch of questions that would get me to a point of understanding you in such a way where my assessment or my intuition or both would say, if it was me, Bia, I wouldn't be having sex on the first night, and here's why. Or if it was me, I think you can, and that's okay, and here's why. Mm-hmm. But I would need to know all these other details. I'd ask you so many different questions about that.
Thank you for sharing. A lot of people are stuck. They're trying to find the right one. They're trying to find a perfect match, but they are just going on wrong dates. What are your number one advice for those people to finally find that person and not be going in so many wrong dates one after another?
Yeah, so it's probably two things I would say just immediately without knowing the individual that's asking the question, of course, and I know many are in that situation. I would say this: one, create space from dating for a while. Just be with yourself. If you're really struggling with dating, don't keep pushing dating. Just take a month off, take 2 weeks off, take 3 months off, whatever it is. Just take some space away from it and do some interpersonal reflection around that. Get to know what you really, really want. The second thing I would say is, maybe there's three things. I would say, learn to say no faster. Learn to say no faster, because when you say no faster, you open up your yeses. And the third thing I'd say, which is connected to saying no faster, is trust your choices. And I know it's scary. You keep saying no to people. You're limiting the dating pool. You keep getting more refined and more clear on what you want. You limit the dating pool, but you want quality candidates. You don't want candidates that aren't quality. That's the thing.
Thank you. When you say no faster, it means when you see that that person is not what you're looking for, just already say no.
Correct. That's right. Yeah. And at the same time, I don't mean to throw a wrench here in the works, but at the same time, don't be too picky in the sense that, yes, know your worth, know what you want, but don't have this perfect image of what this individual needs to be. Like, be open to it coming in a different way, shape, and form. So
you tap into something really interesting right now, because I hear a lot from that, where people create their list and they're very specific of the things that they want, because in the past they got traumatized with someone that was crappy to them. So now they have this list of how they want their perfect partner to be. But every day that they go, if the person doesn't have that quality, they already know. Is there, where can we find a balance in between that, to know what we want, but also have some flexibility?
For me, and what I've seen in many people that I've worked with, is surrender plays a really deep role in this. So surrendering to and trusting. Surrender requires trust. So you're trusting the process. You're opening yourself up to the mystery of the unknown, and you're clear on who you are and what you want, and you're also giving it maybe to God, maybe to something higher than yourself, something bigger than yourself, something unknown to yourself, and you're trusting. And that is part of the process when it comes to immersing ourselves into love and relationship and intimacy.
Thank you. I'm sure our listeners are going to get a lot of insightful tips from you today. And there's one question we ask in every podcast that we do. If you could leave only one message to the world, what would that message be?
Slow down.
Slow down. Can you explain a little more about that? No, just slow down.
I don't want to explain more, because I want it to mean what it means. Let me ask you this question. May I ask you a question? What does slow down mean for you, personally, for you? Not the definition of it, but in your life, specific to how you're living your life now, where could slowing down really benefit you?
Be more present. I think that's what slow down means, because we have all these tabs open of all these things that we have to do. So slow down for me means be more present here and now. And yeah.
Why is that important to you, being more present?
Because this is where we create our life, and this is the only moment that we get. So everything that, when we are present, we can pour our heart and soul into what we're doing, and not thinking about the future or thinking about the things that happened in the past, because those things are not here yet, or are in the past. We can access it back. So I think the slow down for me would be that, be present.
Yeah, I love that. That's very applicable to my life as well. Yeah, for sure. Like currently, just with how I'm living my life, I can very much resonate with that too. I think it's a beautiful gift for all of us to slow down. I think we live in a very fast world.
Yes, I feel like especially now with AI and more technology and more things coming up, we're just like on the go, and that just keep us distracted from life, right? From here, from now. Is that what means slow down means to you as well? Or what is your
part of it? For sure, yeah. The other part for me personally would be slow down when I am being reactive and coming from an unconscious place. Like, slow down so I can really sense into the feeling, be with the sensation that I'm experiencing, so I can then consciously choose whether I really want to express that frustration, abrasiveness, impatience, raising my voice, whatever it may be, and slow down enough to really consciously choose, but also be present to what is really happening. So I'm frustrated, but is there something underneath the frustration? So slowing down enough to absorb all of that, to be able to make changes in the way that I respond to life as opposed to react.
And that works very well for relationships. If we're just reactive and exploding, then fights arise. Do you recommend people like taking time off when their emotions are raising?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great practice. Again, having healthy agreements when you're in healthy places, it's a great practice to have, to say, hey, Christine and I will we'll put our fist up in the air, and that means, hey, we'll remember we're in this together. We're on the same team. Let's slow down. Let's have some breath. Let's go for a walk separately. Let's come back. Talk when we're calm.
Are there three main tips from your personal marriage that you could share that has helped you guys to stay connected and in love and growing together, not apart, and work as a team? Is there three things that you guys do in your daily routine? Or
Yeah. Be willing to repair with conflict is really important. Number one. It's not just number one, in no particular order. Be willing to repair in conflict. Have fun and play in relationship is really important. And set deliberate time aside on a regular basis, weekly, daily, weekly, monthly, to just communicate and check in with each other and share and have a space to share and to be received. They're pretty powerful practices. They can be.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of that and we're very, very thankful for your time and your work. And you know that you're impacting a lot of lives and helping a lot of women and also men to heal their traumas and look at relationships in a different perspective. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on your show and sharing me with your audience. Appreciate it.